And we are live. Welcome to the Rome Show. I have a podcast legend here. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing terrific. It's great to be here, Holden. Yeah.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, so how you been?
I'm
How's it
doing all
going?
right. I'm doing all right. Just working on projects and live events and all sorts of stuff, trying to keep the content flowing, as they say.
Right. 24/7 thing.
Well, it seems like that sometimes. That's for sure. Yeah.
Right. So, how did you get into podcasting?
Well, back in 1999, I started a radio show. I walked into a radio station and did a radio show in studio and started making content. So that's kind of when I started. I took the content out of the studio on a cassette tape and played it into my computer and made an MP3 file back in 2000 or so, and then kept doing that for about 6 or 7 years. And podcasting started in 2004, so I was one of the first shows to put my MP3 file into an enclosure tag in an RSS feed. So, and all of a sudden I was a podcast. Back then, it really wasn't that big a deal because most of the audience that I was getting from my radio show was coming from either satellite radio or streaming back in those days. So it's a different landscape. And then podcasting was more about the download, right? So that was a different method of distribution. In the early days, it really wasn't that significant. So it was really over a period of time, it became more important. So, and that takes us up to even today. And there's been a 20-year journey that I've been on the podcasting side too, working for a variety of different companies and doing a bunch of different shows. I've pod faded and done shows for all sorts of different platforms and things like that. So, and I continue to do that today. So,
Nice. So, you basically were doing podcasting before it was introduced as a podcast, basically.
yeah, I was doing well back in those days. It was really just a radio show that I had actually taken out of the studio and made into a digital format and put it out there in the same way, a lot of ways, how we have it today. It just back in those days, it was off of my own servers because back in those days, there wasn't any Libsyn or Spreaker or any of those platforms didn't even exist yet. So I had to build my own server infrastructure. I think at one point I had 4 co-located rack servers that would serve my streams and my downloads and my website. And then I started to host other people doing the same thing. And then eventually I kind of got out of hosting and doing that kind of stuff. It turned out to be a really kind of a pain in the neck because over a period of time, my servers would increasingly get hacked or get compromised, and I didn't have the security credentials to keep up with it or the time. So eventually, I shut down my own servers and I transferred it over to other platforms that were, like a Libsyn or whatever, that was really more specialized in that kind of activity.
Nice. Big podcast legend. So, you started doing radio back then. Are you still in radio now, or you're full-time
No,
podcast?
I don't really have anything to do with radio anymore. I've participated in a lot of radio type, like being a guest on a radio show or spoke at radio conferences and things like that over many years. So I've had a connection with the radio side, but not from a content creator standpoint for quite a while. Right.
Nice. So you're a full-time content creator.
Well, yeah, I would say, really, if you back it up and you look at it, I mean, really all the content that I create is in support of other content creators and trying to share knowledge and understanding of the medium. But actually getting more and more involved in the production of live events and doing other types of activities around creating content where I'm not necessarily in front of the microphone or in front of the camera, but I am doing a bunch of that kind of stuff too. So
Nice. And you're from Connecticut?
I'm originally from the Seattle area. So I've only been out in Connecticut now for about 4 years.
Okay.
So I'm a fairly recent West to East Coast transplant. So it was just a change in life path, and I chose a different experience for a while. I had spent my whole life up in the Seattle area, and then just decided to try something new on the East Coast, and it's been good. I've had a good time out here. Yeah.
Nice. And since you've been in like media, radio, podcasting for so long, you're still going, you're still consistent. What's like a few things that you did to stay consistent, or like what was it that made you stick with it during the failures and
Yeah.
something didn't happen?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a steady over a period of time of passion and desire to keep learning. Really, at the end of the day, that's what keeps me moving forward. Is that I'm really at the core. I'm kind of a technologist, so I like to tinker and get involved in new technology. That was the radio show that I did, was about the growth and development of the internet and the World Wide Web. So it was very kind of looking at the path of technology and how it's impacting society and culture and those kind of things. And but my career kind of took a different course because I went to work for Microsoft and Xbox, and then I worked for Podcast One, and then a bunch of these podcast platforms where I got increasingly put in a position where helping other content creators do what I had done and continue to do. And so that's why it's so important for me to continue to be a content creator as well, because then I'm in there using the tools and learning as well, right? Because the podcast medium and the online media space continues to evolve and develop and change, and there's definitely an emphasis now more on monetization and all these things. When the early days of podcasting, there really wasn't much motivation around monetization. So that's kind of grown into be something much more significant now. As to be honest with you, podcasting is, as a medium, is starting to replace mainstream media. So that's a path that's taken us down a completely different kind of outcome here of sorts, and how things have kind of evolved and changed have been this kind of convergence of content creators from mainstream media shifting over to independent creators, um, to becoming more like a podcaster over time, when they maybe, a lot of those talent maybe spent a lot of years in TV and film and radio and things like that. They're shifting increasingly over to the digital medium, which is increasingly podcasting.
Right. And do you ever see podcasting stopping, or you just see it continuously to grow and try new things?
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to grow. It's the path of the future. There's no question. I think the big question in the industry is, what's the scope of the meaning of the term podcast? I mean, does it include video? Is it wanting to remain an audio only medium? I think that's the big tension in the industry right now. And how far down this path do we want to commercialize the podcasting medium? And is there a danger of us becoming like commercial radio at some point? Because a lot of the companies that are pushing monetization came from commercial radio or came from commercial television. And so we're seeing this pressure for the digital side to increasingly mirror what those broadcast kind of platforms were. So that's the tension in the industry right now. Is a lot of people want to make money, and a lot of people just want to create content. And so we have this tension growing around, well, how many ads are okay in a podcast? How long are the ads? How authentic are the ads? How much like radio or TV ads versus more kind of organic host read type of host endorsement type of thing? I think that's really at the core of the tension of the medium right now. And then also the growth in development of these big proprietary platforms like a YouTube or Apple or Spotify or whatever. They're increasing power and influence over what has historically been kind of an open medium, which is based on open RSS, and people are able to just freely distribute their content. Increasingly, these larger media companies are wanting to capture more and more control as this medium grows and becomes much more impactful and having an impact on the media landscape. And that's what's happening right now.
Right. Absolutely right. I definitely see it as the future. And there's just
It's the
so many.
present. It's the present and the future at the same time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just it's crazy how it's evolving. We have access to so many things like probably 20 years ago, like the big companies only had access to, and now the independent creators, we got our own type of tools.
Yeah. Right.
I love it.
And yeah, and those tools are becoming increasingly easier and easier to use, but yet they're becoming more and more powerful too at the same time. Especially when you combine this with AI technology, the tools are becoming simpler and more effective. But you do have to be careful with AI tools. Sometimes
Yeah.
it doesn't actually do maybe what you would want it to do. It does what it thinks it should do, and sometimes that's a disconnect with the creator and what their intent is. Yeah.
Right. You use AI?
What's that?
You use AI?
Yeah, I do, for mainly for some light editing and also for coming up with descriptions and summaries and to do like short clips and things like that. I don't really use AI at a really deep level to come up with content ideas and things like that, but it can be it can be a way of helping organize your thoughts around what you're doing with content. And I think that's important, but it's always something that you have to get in. At least it is so far, where you have to get in and edit it and make sure that it's really representing your beliefs and your views, right? If you're doing like a solo show or something like that, if you're doing like a conversational show like this one is, I'm not sure AI has a big place in that. So it's just a matter of taking the output from like a conversation like we're having right now and creating a transcript and creating like maybe a summary or something like that, or putting chapters in there that help people, you know, find maybe a topic that they have an interest in, and they can just jump forward or not into whatever that topic is. So there's lots of ways of slicing this up now.
Right. And are you like doing your brand and your show? Is it just you, or you have like a producer and a team?
No, it's all just me. I mean, if I'm going to learn how to use these new tools and how to advise others to do it, I have to actually get in there and push the buttons and make the mistakes and struggle my way through it. I haven't really ever done a show where I relied on a production staff or team or anything like that. It's always been a individual creator. I've had many co-hosts, things like that came in and contributed, whether it be a regular co-host or a guest co-host. I've had both formats where I would have like maybe two or three fairly regular guest co-hosts that I would bring in for different shows. But then I've also had shows that I've done where I had the same co-host every episode. So yeah,
Nice.
it's
And
always fun.
right. And being a podcast Hall of Famer, how's that?
Yeah, I mean, that was back in 2017. I got inducted into the Hall of Fame, but I am working on the Hall of Fame on an ongoing basis to keep it alive and keep it going forward into the future. So we do have another Hall of Fame ceremony happening in Orlando here in January. So we're going to be inducting another 10 people into the Podcast Hall of Fame here coming up down in Podfest, which is a podcast conference down in Orlando in January. Yeah.
Nice. I always wanted to go to those. When you go there, how was it? It looks real good.
Yeah, I've been to. I think I've been to every one of the Podfest conferences that they've ever held, and I've been to all of the podcast movements as well. It's more of an independent creator event, is what I would classify it as. A podcast movement is more of kind of like a conference about the business side of podcasting more. is kind of the direction that these individual conferences have taken for business reasons, and just trying to take on a different niche in the podcast industry and what people are looking for. So Podfest is very much a creator event. As a focus, it's got a strong kind of content creator community around it, which puts the emphasis on being an independent content creator. It doesn't attract a lot of people from, like people from like Spotify or those type of companies that are building teams, or National Public Radio, or any of those type of companies. It's not an attractive event for those folks. Those folks usually go to Podcast Movement. But if you're an individual creator, which I definitely want to be associated with, and like yourself, that would be a great event for you too.
Yeah, I gotta go to one.
Yeah.
And I see that we have it like it's like 4 or 5 days, and they have like different things to do throughout the whole day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's usually multi-tracks, so you can select a specific track if you want to learn a specific part of podcasting, or you want to jump around to learn different parts of the industry. It covers it all there. So if you want to monetize, or if you just want to promote your show and things like that, or come up with different type of show concepts, whatever, that event's great at kind of sharing some ideas on that kind of stuff. Right.
I gotta go to one. Have you been to I see like they have like after parties, like a dance at the end of the night. Have you been to those?
Yeah, I usually do most of the after hours kind of parties and events and things like that, because it's a great place to meet other people in the industry and talk to them. Even though going to some of those events can be difficult to network at, because there's usually loud music, but that goes with pretty much any conference on after hours events. And over time, I've lost my voice many times at these conferences, because you're trying to scream over the loud music but that's just kind of a culture thing, right? It's people are, you go to a party and they expect music, but really the purpose of going to a party is to network with other people. So maybe my advice is to turn the volume down. So I can actually talk to someone. I'm really tall, so if a person is shorter, it makes it hard for them to hear me, and for them to be, for me to speak to them. So it's one of those things that, I wish event organizers would consider the ability of people to communicate at events like that.
Right. Just turn it down just a little bit.
Yeah, just so I don't lose my voice, because oftentimes at these events, I'll have to be on a panel or have to present the next day, and by the end of the night, I've pretty much lost my voice. So it's not good on that side either.
Crazy. You're a coffee drinker or tea?
Oh, both.
Okay.
Yeah. I probably drink more coffee than I do tea, though. But right. But
Black or flavored?
Flavored a little bit. I put collagen in there and some oil and other types of things, some chocolate collagen and things like that. So I try and flavor it up a little bit. Straight coffee is not the most enjoyable thing to eat or drink.
Right. Too strong.
Right.
So you being a Hall of Famer, you being a podcast legend, when do you how can I say this? When do you accept, or you say this person like is a part of the podcast industry, or how much work does a person have to put in until it's like, okay, they're a part of the podcast industry?
Yeah, I think it can happen at all sorts of different kind of entry points and entry levels. I think just participating in the medium, whether it be as part of your job or as a side hobby that you're doing, I think that's all valid. It's not. I don't really pass any judgment on a person's involvement and what's okay and what's not. I think just putting yourself out there, and I just have a lot of respect for someone that is willing to get on a microphone or get in front of a camera and start creating content, really without any kind of value judgment on the content itself. Just being able to put yourself out there, and take a risk like that takes some courage. And I have a lot of respect for that. I mean, that's kind of how I started too. I wasn't a professional speaker or a professional radio personality when I started either. I just walked into a radio station and said, "Do you have a show about technology and the internet?" And just showed up the first day and got on the microphone and put myself out there. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing now. And that's what's really grown this medium as a podcast medium is that people are, there's a spectrum of personality. There's a lot of people that are introverts that are in this medium too, that are probably scared to be up on stage, but yet they're in their home office or whatever, and they have a microphone and they feel a little bit safer because nobody's kind of watching them when they're doing something, and they can just record, right? But doing stuff live, I mean, I'm really attracted towards doing that. I do a lot of live shows too, and I help produce live programs, and I also host live programs, and so that's where my passion is. I kind of like the whole live experience because what you're doing is you're connecting with your viewers or your listeners, and that is always a fun thing to do. It's always fun to see someone give you a comment on a live stream and be able to talk to them through your microphone over the internet in a real-time basis. It's not a thing to do that's easy for everyone to actually understand how to do it and understand what the expectations are and understand kind of the workflow of it, using the tools to manage being able to speak as well as manage software at the same time. Because oftentimes if you're the sole creator, you kind of have to do everything. You're even sweeping the floors, right? So, I mean, you have to be able to understand what works and what doesn't work and play with things and take risks. And that's why I create content, is that it's all about trying to learn and get better.
Yeah. Right. And put the work in and grind.
Yeah. And don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake, because believe me, you're going to make lots of mistakes. It's just, are you learning from them is the key takeaway. Is, are you looking for ways that maybe you can streamline something, or you can organize yourself, or you can prepare yourself in a way that helps you not make a mistake? I mean, I think the goal is always to not make mistakes, but it's, there's a lot of people that will say, "Oh, well, fail fast," right? Make all the mistakes as quickly as you can. But you also have to be able to learn from that. And sometimes learning is feeling pain over a period of time, not just one time. So sometimes you have to feel the pain multiple times because that pain hits you, or that challenge hits you in a little different way each time. And so you have to just be able to learn from that and adjust and change your approach slightly, or just make minor adjustments. And then over a period of time, what you do is you kind of smooth it out, and it becomes easier and easier to navigate those things and have confidence in yourself that you can manage that, right? And you can get through it, and it's okay if there's a mistake. So,
right. That's what I'm working on. I'm like, if I make a mistake, I'm like real tough on myself. So I'm working on just like, it's all right. Take a day off,
right?
Get back at it.
Right. But, I think the key thing is, doing your best to not make those mistakes, but at the same time, be open to, we're all human and we make mistakes. Some of us are much more capable of learning something and making a change more rapidly than others. And that's okay. And I think it also is really based on your own life experience, and also based on your own skills that you are coming to it with. A lot of kind of like radio and television broadcasters have an advantage because they've been on microphone and they've been on camera for years. So when they start doing something, like this, it's more kind of second nature to them, or they know how to read a teleprompter, or they know how to speak and think at the same time and think ahead. Uh, what a lot of people struggle with is the ability to navigate software and to navigate textual feedback on a screen while you're trying to produce content at the same time in
Yeah.
a live video production. So that takes a little practice.
Oh yeah, lots of practice.
I mean,
So
you're going through it right now. So, right.
right. Um, how do you handle your promoting and your marketing? Like when you come out with a new podcast episode, are you like hands on with it?
Yeah, I do. There's a spectrum to that too. I think, where the industry is at on that stuff right now is pretty involved. I think it's pretty complex, and there's a lot of elements. It's kind of like running a small business or running any business. There's marketing techniques that work out there, and it's good to implement those things. But there's a spectrum here. There's also a spectrum of what your time gives you availability to do certain promotions and what your expectations are. What are your goals? I mean, all those things are factors in how you promote and how you drive your show forward. My goals have always been is just to help people and to keep learning. So I'm not as caught up myself personally on audience growth or being perfect or anything like that. I want to push the envelope on what I'm doing, and I'm not as concerned about how many people are watching or listening. I don't constantly look at my stats or anything like that. I'm more about improving myself and improving my understanding of the medium. But that's just a personal preference. I know I work with a lot of creators that are very focused on growing their show and wanting it to be perfect and wanting it to be marketed so it's regularly growing, and they may be willing to invest money to buy boosts or buy promotions on platforms to escalate that, and to also you know buy or purchase or get people to come in and help them do that from a PR perspective or from an outreach to get yourself booked on other podcasts as a guest. So there's all sorts of ways to go to market like this, and I've done all of them. I've done a paid, placement kind of a contract with a company that booked me on a couple hundred podcasts over like a
Mm.
1 year period of time, and I've done those kind of contracts, but before, and they're terrific. The problem I ran into with that, and just to kind of from a little learning from that, is you can get a little overexposed. You
Too
can be on
exposed.
too many shows too fast, and they tend to kind of pile up on you, right? And it's like, especially if every interview that you do, the conversation is almost identical, which I ran into that challenge a few times when many different content creators wanted to have the same kind of conversation with me. Um, and it put me in a situation where I was like increasingly over a period of time thinking about how I can change what I say and how I say it and add some value to each of these shows that is unique from the last 5 interviews that I've done, right? So it is a little bit of putting the emphasis on the guests to bring something that's new to a conversation or an interview, and think about the context of the show itself and what the show wants. But it's also up to the host to kind of set the table. Like I was a guest on an interior design podcast, uh, just to give a little context. And I'm certainly not an interior designer, so I wouldn't consider myself to be an expert. But the angle that she took with the episode was, well, how do you design your podcast, right?
Right.
So trying to take that angle to it, right? And that gets into aesthetics, it gets into graphics, it gets into your brand, it gets into all these elements. And so I fashioned the conversation to be more about that, right? And how you take a podcast concept and you turn it into a brand, or you turn it into a feeling or a style statement. right? And those were important aspects of what she was looking for in her podcast. So that's kind of how I approach it, and I do think about that a lot when I do shows.
Super nice. But over 100, being a guest on 100 shows, that's a lot.
Actually, I think it totaled up to about 200 in a year, so it was a lot. And at one point, I just took a pause. I just didn't do it. There was a period of time I just didn't do any interviews because I kind of wanted to have all that stuff kind of settle out a little bit. So, I mean, it's not like the interviews that I typically do get huge numbers or anything like that. So, and that's the other takeaway about the podcasting space is that, you do go on a bunch of different podcasts and there's not a lot of duplicated audience, right? So it isn't like
Right.
you're speaking to the same person 10 times. If you're on 10 different podcasts, you're typically speaking to 10 different people on 10 different podcasts. So, and that's helpful. And it's something to think about when you're marketing your show too, or if you're an advertiser, that buying across a large number of shows for host endorse or advertising and things like that, each podcast you advertise in is probably reaching a different audience.
Right.
So,
And, yeah, that's a good technique too.
yeah. So, and it's a powerful thing to be on other people's podcasts. It gives you a thing that you can share as a guest with your community or people that are following you, and it also, and I try and do this too, is it shows that I care about others and I want to help others by being a guest on their show and spending my time helping others in the podcasting space, and it helps to expand your personal network. It helps to expand your knowledge because I can learn from you and see what you do, and everything is just builds on top of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. I really appreciate you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Podcast Hall of Famer, Rob. And this episode will be on all my channels, and I'll be promoting it.
Sounds great.
All right.
Thank
you,
you,
Rob.
Holden. I appreciate it. Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Right.
Wait. Before we go.
Okay. One more thing, right?
Yeah, one more thing. I like that. I like to ask all my guests if they could give one or two life tips.
Yeah, I think what we need more of today is people trying to be personally responsible for their lives and think about others, and I think those are important things to bring to anything that you're doing. But it's hard because it's giving when I think a lot of people in the world today are kind of lacking and want to take, right? So, and I would say that's the big thing. If I think about my 20 years of being a podcaster and working for platforms and helping a lot of people and giving advice and things like that, is to just share what you know. Each one of us has value in the world and has a life experience that may be helpful to someone else. If you've been through challenges in your life, those can be good examples for others. And it can be valuable content too. It's more authentic, it's more real. And I think a lot of people are looking for honest people that are willing to share honest experiences. So.
Nice. Good advice. Appreciate it, Rob.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Peace.